I think also in terms of office, just to the general office relationships, I think having a kid meant that I was sort of better at communicating and understanding colleagues, and sort of I think you bring a deeper emotional intelligence and emotional responsiveness back to the office because you've been dealing with either little babies that can't verbalize what they need, and you have to try and sort of understand and interpret what's going on and sort of read their signals.
I really appreciated having Rob Sturrock on my LinkedIn live show as part of my 31 Days of Transferable Skills initiative. Rob Sturrock is the author of the book Man Raises Boy and a Dad Advocate. Rob and I spoke about his transferable skills from being a stay-at-home dad for a period of time. We also talked about flexible work, part-time work, and advocating for fatherhood and gender equality. Hello, Rob.
Hi, Karin.
Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, it's so nice to see you again all across the world.
Yeah. I think I think this is the third time we've chatted too, which is lovely.
Yes, it's been really nice because I feel it's given us like an opportunity to really sort of target different aspects of all your, professional background about your care work, your advocacy. And so, I'm super happy that you can be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's delighted. Thanks for having me again.
And now there might be people, Rob, who don't know you yet. So if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself with 5 facts according to the working out loud method, please.
Yeah, sure. So 5 facts. So, well, firstly, my name's Rob Sturrock. Secondly, I wrote a book about how fathers can be actively involved in raising their children, most specifically young boys. The book is called Man Raises Boy, and it came out just over about 18 months ago now. I live in an area of Sydney called the Northern Beaches, which, as it might sound like, has a long, beautiful strip of all these lovely sandy white beaches up and down the coast. I live there with my 2 children. I've got a little daughter who's 5 years old, a little boy who's 3 years old. And I guess the last fact is my family and I are absolutely nuts and fanatics for Christmas. So when it comes to about late November, early December, we bust out a lot of lights, a lot of decorations, a lot of little statues and toys. We do, the advent calendars. And then we have matching Christmas pajamas that we wear on Christmas Eve because we just love it so much. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, I remember, when my kids were a little bit younger, we did a lot of these things as well. It was a lot of fun. Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This year we had our traditional cheese fondue, which we've done for decades, basically. Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Yes, it's quite tasty. So now, as we are talking about children, so today, and for people who are just joining us, my conversation with Rob today is part of the 30 Days of Transferable Skills initiative, where basically I am talking with people from all around the world about transferable skills that they might have gained by unpaid care work, volunteering, traveling for an extended period of time, or by living in a different country. And so, Rob, what I would love to hear from you today is, before you started your career, how much experience did you have with caregiving?
None is the short answer. So I'm an only child, so no siblings, very small family. So I didn't spend a lot of time around sort of younger cousins or anything like that. Didn't do any babysitting as a teenager. And to be honest, for a lot of my 20s, as I talk about in my book, the thought of kids either bored me or terrified me. I had no disposition to caring for young children whatsoever. And I certainly didn't have any elderly relatives that I was sort of caring for, like, attentively as well. So I never, this is one of the reasons I say this, because, I think for some men in particular, there's a worry or a reluctance that, am I going to be a good carer? And I say this about my background because I had no experience. I had not only did I have no experience, I had no interest in the prospect of caring for children or others. So I say it because I think it's like, if I can do it, anyone can. So sometimes I even look back at where I was in my early 20s, and I think that version of me would be completely shocked about where I've ended up in terms of not only caring for kids, but actually going around and talking about it a lot. So yeah, it's been a big evolution.
Yeah, wow. It's like, so now, as you have just shared, given your, lack of experience with children, young children, caregiving, what or why did you actually then decide to become a stay-at-home dad for a period of time?
Yeah, so I guess for background for anyone that's watching this at any point, so I've done sort of a couple of big stints of caring for my children. So I took some time off around their birth, so 3 weeks each for both kids. I then took sort of paid parental leave from 2 different employers for 3 months in total, and then I just spent the vast majority of 2021 being a stay-at-home dad, probably about 7 to 8 months. So I took a redundancy from my old job, and before I started my new job, I spent a good solid 7 or 8 months being the primary caregiver at home. So why? Look, it's a good question. I think my wife firstly was able to talk to me about the potential joys of having a family and what we could do. And I think that helped change my mindset over time. And I think once we decided we wanted to have kids, it was kind of an easy emotional or like, intellectual switch for me from going from, okay, I don't really think of kids in my future, to when they were very clearly going to be in my future. I'm like, well, if they are, then I want to be as present and involved and as loving as possible, because I really want to make kids to grow up with a dad that was around, that was present, that was active in their lives, and also just made their household happy and fun and caring. And I didn't want, my wife to be shouldering all the caring burden. Like, we've always had a pretty equal relationship. We've always valued each other's careers equally. We valued each other's times equally. Before we had children, we were equally doing the domestics. So we wanted to carry that forward into having kids. So I think when it became a reality of like, okay, we're going to try and have a family now, I just knew that I wanted to be present. And I guess it was partly driven by what I just wanted as an individual, and it was partly driven by my experience of, I had a very loving and caring dad, but it was the classic male breadwinner who worked a lot in the 80s and 90s, which meant a lot of long hours, which meant he was coming back late in the evenings, and he traveled a lot. My dad traveled a lot when I was probably about 8 till I was about 17 or 18. So there was a decade there where my dad was constantly either in different states in Australia or traveling overseas for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So I sort of came into parenting thinking, okay, well, I want to be as present as I possibly can in my kids' life, and tried to adjust my working life accordingly.
That, it sounds really fascinating to hear, all your thought process and, how you came to deciding to become a stay-at-home dad. And so what I'm curious is, given that you had shared earlier that you didn't really have much experience related to caregiving, were there any skills from your professional career that helped you as transferable skills when you started being a caregiver?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I normally think about it in the reverse, right? What did I take back to the workforce?
Yes.
I don't think there actually was a huge amount for me that I took from my professional life into my private life. I guess probably one of the big skills I took was probably being organized, and there's only so much organization you can do when you've got, newborns and babies and toddlers. But I think a sense of being organized in terms of what needs to be done at any one point in time to take care of a baby, I think that was helpful. I think, to be honest, a lot of what I brought to being a new dad, and sort of, and there was lots of trial and error and, learning by doing things incorrectly or in a different way. I think mostly was my personal character and attributes in terms of trying to be an empathetic, attuned, sort of emotionally responsive person, was probably what gave me the best start as being a dad. I actually, my job, and we'll probably talk about this later, is, there's a lot of sort of academic style research and writing and sort of dealing with a lot of different stakeholders. None of that I really could bring to bear. I guess some other professions could, if they were, particularly if they were care specialists or health specialists or teachers, they could bring that, quite swiftly into parenting. For me, no, I was sort of drawing on more of what I'm like as a person outside of the office. And yeah, as I'm sure we'll talk about later too, I found in the reverse scenario, what did I take back to the office? Well, that surprised me the most. I took a bunch back to the office that I didn't expect to.
Yes, definitely. I'd love to talk about this in a little bit. So, what I'd like to, hear from you a bit more, because I think it is so important for people to hear who might not have gone through that experience themselves. What was it actually like to be a stay-at-home dad? And also, did you have any other stay-at-home dads that you met in your neighborhood or in your city or in other ways?
Yeah. Look, overall, it was an amazing experience. So, as I said, I've been really lucky where I've had the chance to do it, for a considerable amount of time, 3 times now. So, 2 stints for 3 months each, and my last stint was 7 months, and that was really a bonus stint. I kind of thought after my last 3 month paid parental leave, that was probably it. So, as hard as the redundancy is on your career, the time to be at home was incredible. So, my first reaction is that being a stay-at-home dad was, I found it immensely rewarding. Like, I really loved all the ins and outs of being a stay-at-home dad. So I get a lot of personal satisfaction in sort of making sure the house is kind of neat and tidy and stocked with groceries and it's kind of clean so that we can all enjoy it and enjoy the space. I get a lot of fun out of sort of making our kids laugh and playing games with them and taking them on adventures. So particularly this last 7 months that I had in Australia, we were sort of, a lot of it was before another set of lockdowns, so we had a bit of freedom. So we went to all these different zoos. We sort of went, we did day trips outside of Sydney where we drove for a couple of hours and did lots of different adventures. We played a lot of games at home. We used our imagination a lot more. Now that my kids are kind of 3 and 5, we could actually do some of that stuff. Like let's create games. I found that all really rewarding. And I guess the big thing for me at the end of it was just the closeness of the relationship with my 2 kids. It just, equally with their mum, they would come to me for emotional support or assistance with something in life or wanting to play. Even this morning when I was getting ready for talking to you, they were coming and saying, Daddy, come and play with us. And that's great. Sometimes it's not always the most convenient opportunity when they want to do that, but it's great that they see that and they go, I want to go play with Dad because Dad's, a lot of fun. So for me, the best part of being a stay-at-home dad was just that real closeness of a relationship. And you're there for so many little milestones. And that's the thing for me too, that I get sad for a lot of other parents and dads in particular, where they might not get the time to be a stay-at-home dad because there's so many little milestones that kids go through that you can miss so easily. Some of it's obviously developmental, they learn to be more articulate, their physical development, increases, but there's just a lot of little things that happen in their personality as they grow, and you sort of see different sides of their character. And if you're just working and coming home at the end of the day pretty exhausted and you're sort of tucking them into bed or spending a little bit of time on the weekend, you can miss all these things. So I feel really fortunate that I've had a couple of big chunks now where I've seen their personality develop as well, and it's such special fleeting time. I'm 40, so there's a very good chance I'm working for at least another 35 years, almost, if I last that long. So there's only a few special moments in years when they're young, when they really want to play with you, and they have this real sense of wonder and awe at life and all the little things around you. So I feel very privileged that I've had the chance to be there for a lot of it. And my wife makes these fantastic photo books every year because obviously, like a lot of parents, you're taking hundreds of photos during the week. They can very easily get lost on your phone or on some sort of hard drive somewhere. So my wife very studiously at the end of every year sits down and collates these amazing digital photo books. And not only do I just love looking through them for their own sake, but I love to be able to look through the books and say, I've been there for a lot of these memories. I wasn't missing. I didn't, I wasn't at work. A lot of the things we did as a family, I was there for. And that means a lot to me. And I think it'll mean even more for me as I get older.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, it's like, and it brings back, as my kids are older, right? It brings back the memories, what it was like, and how many little things each day one can experience. Yes, that's, thank you so much for sharing. And now, as we've talked before, going now the reverse, what of what type of transferable skills did you learn throughout your being a stay-at-home dad that have become helpful for your professional life?
Sure. Look, and I love this question. I think it's great, and I think it really helps men understand that taking time out from work to be a carer comes with a lot of different benefits that you might not expect, because I think a lot of men think about parental leave in terms of, what am I going to miss out on? Am I going to miss out on promotion? Am I going to miss out on some big project at work? Is my job going to be in jeopardy? And I think there's a lot of sense of, if I take parental leave, what am I missing out on? But the reality is what you're going to gain. And we've talked about what you can gain at home, and then it's, what are you going to bring back to the office? So I think the big one for me, number one, was I was so much more efficient and effective with time. And you think you're pretty good. The more you work, you think, okay, I'm getting further on my career. I'm more efficient and productive. But it's really when I was a parent and you're doing all that juggle at home, and then you go back to work with a very different sort of perspective on time. And I don't think I even realized that I had that perspective until I was sort of a few weeks into working again. I just realized I was better at multitasking. I was more efficient. I was getting through things more quickly because the time was a bit more pressurized, I guess, because you had harder deadlines rather than just thinking, oh, well, I can work a bit late tonight. I've got nothing on. You're kind of thinking, well, no, I've got to go do daycare pickup, or I've got to go give my wife a break. She's been with the kids all day, and you're trying to sort of make the most of your time. So for me, time management and multitasking was the first big thing I took back. I just found I was so much more productive with time, and so much better at getting through things more quickly. I think also in terms of office, just sort of general office relationships, I think having a kid meant that I was sort of better at communicating and understanding colleagues, and sort of, I think you bring a deeper emotional intelligence and emotional responsiveness back to the office, because you've been dealing with, either little babies that can't verbalize what they need, and you have to try and, sort of understand and interpret what's going on and sort of read their signals, or you've got young kids that might be able to articulate a little bit, or might be super fussy, or might have big emotions that they're struggling to communicate. So that, dealing with that parenting side, I think when I came back to the office, I was better at sort of reading colleagues, understanding where they came from, understanding when people were a bit more stressed or angry. I think also that was really important for me. That meant that sometimes not to take things too personally at the office, because I'm someone who can take things very personally. And if I forget and have an abrupt conversation with the manager or an abrupt email, I can think it's all about me, when it's actually understanding what that person's going through at any one point in time. So I think a greater sense of sort of responsiveness and empathy for others, I think it's really important in the office. And for me, it's a soft skill that we tend to undervalue. We put a lot of our priorities on like the hard productivity skill sets, but I think being able to be more emotionally attuned and responsive to your colleagues and work in an office with empathy, I think is hugely important. Probably now more than ever, when there's so much remote work and so much stress in people's lives of dealing with COVID and lockdowns, to be able to have that extra level of sort of intelligence, I think is really important. And I looked at those for me are sort of some of the big skills. And I think it's really important to be talking about the benefits of parental leave to your career, because a lot of those sort of skills like multitasking, time management, emotional intelligence, they're sort of the hallmarks of modern leadership. They what make great managers and employers and leaders, and it comes a lot from directly caring for others. And then I guess the last sort of part of this is you just bring back a different perspective, I guess, on life back to the office. And I think there's so many little things you can get caught up in day to day, urgent tasks and priorities and big projects, and it can really dominate your thinking. And you can start to think that it's the be all and end all, and life is going to hinge on whether this project is delivered on time or whether you do an incredibly brilliant job on something. But I think being a parent and dealing with those other things in life means you have a little bit more perspective, a little bit more philosophical about it, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it means you work any less or you're less productive. I think it just means you put things in their perspective a bit more. And I think that makes it easier on you. I think it's better for your well-being as a worker. And I think it can be easier in a team, or if you're managing a team, to go, yes, of course, it's really important we get this thing done well, but let's put it in perspective. We're not curing cancer or saving lives. We're just doing a certain amount of work, and let's keep it in perspective as we go through these challenging times.
Thank you so much. I think I love these questions as well, because I feel it is so undervalued to this day that
Yeah.
people just don't see this. And we have a couple of questions. Dr. Matthias Niedenführ, hello. He just joined us, and so he has a question. Let's see. He says, "Did you find a common hobby with your kids that helped you bond?"
Oh, that's a good question. But they're young, so they're kind of not quite at the hobby stage. My girl, who's 5, is almost getting to the hobby stage. I guess as of right now, in the end of 2021, particularly with my daughter, the hobby would be swimming and doing anything in a pool or in an ocean. So as I said, I live on the northern beaches in Sydney. We're really close to a lot of beaches and swimming pools. And my daughter loves swimming. She can swim for sort of hours on end. So I think that's been a really good bonding activity, sort of a common hobby that we share, because I love going to the beach. The beach is one of my happy places as well. And when I'm stressed or feeling a bit down, going for a swim or even walking by the beach, I find really important for my well-being too. So that's something that I am finding we're now sharing a mutual sort of passion and love for. She'll love to swim and play games, and I really enjoy that too. So she's just started this summer, what they call in Australian nippers, which is essentially like you join a surf club and you learn about the beach and surfing and the waves and everything as a young kid with a bunch of other young kids. It's kind of like sort of like a surf school or a beach school. So we do it once a week on the weekends. So that's becoming something we share as a hobby. My little boy's probably a little young for hobbies, but when it's me and my 2 kids, the one thing we start to do mutually is we play a lot of creative games. So my wife and I have talked about this a lot lately. My wife is fantastic at doing the craft art side with the kids. She loves to paint and get out, the old rolls of toilet paper and the paper and make things. She's terrific at that. For me, when it's a wet, rainy day and we can't go outside, we tend to play creative games. So, we'll rearrange the couch into a variety of different things. We'll get the doonas and pillows out. So we'll play camping games and we'll make a space station. We'll go on hunts and adventures around the house. So I think for me and the 2 kids together, when it's our time together, that's become a common hobby where I try and think of creative, imaginative games where we can use our imagination and sort of do things as a little team around the house. That's becoming kind of a common thing we like to do together. And the way I know that is my kids ask to do those things now. So it started with me sort of saying on the rainy days, "Oh, come on, let's try and find a creative thing to do at home," to now they'll come and be like, "Daddy, can we play Space Station today? Or can we play camping game today? Or can we make a hidey hole out of the couch?" So that I find has been really good for their age, and it allows us to use our imagination a little bit, which I think is great.
Thank you so much for sharing. That sounds really interesting. And Matthias shared that he is using bouldering with his 6-year-old also as
Wow.
a hobby together. Yes. And then he has one more question, and he was curious, as a person he writes who is writing text, how difficult was it for you to get a window large enough to do some proper writing when you were writing your book?
Yeah, it was good question. Yeah, it was really hard. It was really. I kind of look back and I'm still a bit bewildered how I got it done. The book in the end. So I wrote the book in, I think, let me think, about 9 to 10 months. It was meant to be 6. It was probably more 12 actually. It was meant to be 6, and I think I took about a year. It was incredibly hard. So when I got the book deal with the publisher. We were just moved house. I just started a new job. My wife was pregnant with our second kid. She was also suffering from perinatal depression. So we had a lot going on in life, and there was a 1,001 reasons why I was like, no, this is completely the wrong time to try and write a book. But I suspected it was probably the only time I'm going to get the opportunity to do so. So in terms of finding time, at first it was almost creating time out of thin air in the sense that, the middle of the day was either occupied by doing a paid job, or it was taking care of the children or giving my wife some emotional support as she should have struggled through depression. So I had to find time essentially between the hours of sort of like 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. or, 10 p.m. and midnight. That's for a lot of the first part of writing the book. That's where the time came. I'd sort of have to get up at the crack of dawn, come sneak downstairs, make some coffee and sit in the dark and try and write and research for the book. And it was really hard at first because just the physical adjustment of getting yourself sort of up by 4 o'clock and then not only just being up, but being mentally switched on to the point you can write something that's, semi-coherent. It was a real adjustment. But I did adjust, and I did that for a long time. And then towards the end, when it was getting really hard to juggle, where we did have a newborn and our little boy had a lot of complications and problems, and he was a terrible sleeper. That didn't work. I couldn't get up at 4 a.m. because I'd only had sort of 3 hours sleep, and it just didn't function. So I ended up taking a little bit of time off work to sort of finish the first full draft of the books. And that was my wife's idea. She said, you're going to need just some solid time rather than dipping in and out, which is all I could do, was sort of dip in and out for a few hours. I needed a solid chunk. So I took 2 weeks off work, mid-year, or was it 2 years ago? And sort of, it was amazing, the difference. Once I had 2 weeks off where I could just focus every day. Like I helped out in the mornings and nights with the kids but I sort of had between sort of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. to just focus on the book. And the difference was enormous. To be able to get sort of lost in it more, to have more structured time, I think, I finished 2 or 3 chapters in 2 weeks, which hadn't done previously at all. So it was incredibly difficult to find the time, and it's still really hard to find the time to write for all those reasons. But that's, I guess, partly why they call them passion projects, because you're driven by your passion for the subject, despite the obstacles that might be thrown up for it.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, for authentically sharing what it was like. And thank you, Matthias, for asking the question. He is writing a PhD thesis, and his, the mom of the children is a student. So I can only imagine how tricky that is.
Yeah, it sounds very demanding.
Yes. So now I would love to learn now, as you are working part-time, and we've talked about transferable skills, both directions before. And now I'm curious, as you're quote unquote, it's possible that you're practicing something maybe in one part of your day. Could you then practice it or, use that skill you might have learned in the other part of your day? So I'm curious if that has created additional transferable skills.
Working part-time?
Yeah, working part-time. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, I think, again, I guess it's a couple. I guess the first one, again, is your relationship with time, because, I guess I learned some hard lessons when I adjusted to part-time work. I guess I was a bit naive about what was entailed. I kind of assumed that part-time work meant that your workload would reduce by a commensurate rate. But I think the reality of the different roles I've been in, and the reality of, I think, a lot of people's part-time experiences, is that it's essentially a full workload, or a full-time workload that you're managing part-time. So for me, it's 4 days a week. So I've got a very enjoyable, very stimulating job, but it is very demanding. There's lots on the plate. So I think that was the first lesson I learned, is that you are basically still juggling a full workload, and you've just got less time to do it in. So in your relationship with time is, you've got to be so sort of skilled with time. And I guess the big thing that comes with that is learning how to really, really prioritize. And I think everyone thinks and knows that they can prioritize and work. But once you're a parent, and once when you're working part-time, the ability to really work out what is the top priority each day that needs to get done versus the thing that can wait for tomorrow versus the thing that can wait till next week. It's so crucial, because I think if you get that part right, then it does make the week more manageable. I think the other thing I've learned part-time in terms of a transferable skill, and it does kind of go both ways, is being mindful that with every week there is some element of unpredictability and uncertainty that comes with it. It might be on the work side, something unforeseen comes up. So I do a lot of work in my professional job with sort of liaising and advocating to the federal government in Australia. So that can mean that if there's a new policy announcement or a new piece of legislation put forward, that suddenly everything for that week changes to focus on a new priority. And obviously in the parenting world, it can be anything. It can be illness, accidents, something happening at daycare, or it can even be something with my wife's work or her health or my health. So I think being part-time has made me aware that even when you might have a week planned out and you think everything's in balance, that it can get thrown out in any second. And to always be kind of be able to pivot with unpredictability. And I guess that's a good lesson for dealing with COVID and generally in this year, right? Like I think there's this constant element of uncertainty and unpredictability about what might happen. So, but working part-time for now, 4 years or so, I think has helped me just be a bit more comfortable with unpredictability and know that it may happen any one moment. It might not always, you might have a fairly sane, stable week that, that goes off without a hitch. And then the next week you might think it's going to be the same and it blows up on a Tuesday because one of your kids is sick and can't go to daycare and suddenly the whole week's thrown out. So I think learning to deal with unpredictability is a good one. I think for me, it's additionally good because I'm someone that manages anxiety in my regular life. And when you're an anxious person, you like to be in control of things, and there's just some things you have to learn that you can't control, and you've got to go with them a bit more and be a bit more comfortable with that. So I think it's helped me as a person as well. I think there are a couple of the really big ones. But I love working part-time. I wouldn't change it for the world right now. I think when the kids are young, it's incredibly privileged position to be in to work sort of 4 days a week and have a day with them. I just would love to see more, particularly in Australia, more men take it up, because the statistics on men working part-time with children are incredibly low. It's somewhere around maybe 4% of the male working age population works part-time. And a lot of that is not by choice. It's because of economic circumstances or health or disability reasons. It's very few is because they've decided to opt to go for part-time work to care for family. So I'd love to see that statistic change over the next couple of years. And maybe with all the COVID, revolutions of the workplace, it will.
Yes. I mean, it's like, I honestly don't know what the percentage is here in Canada, but just from talking to people and reading in general about, I imagine it's probably very, very low as well. Yes. And now, you had mentioned just now that in your professional work, you're doing advocacy. So I'm curious, because you've done a lot of advocacy about gender equality and fatherhood and, more parental leave that is more neutral. So I'm curious if any of this has also helped on a transferable skill to your professional life.
Yeah, I think it's probably started being the other way around. So I've been in this sort of career trajectory of sort of doing public policy research and advocacy and liaising with government or other key stakeholders for my job for probably the last 5 or 6 years for different employers. So I think I probably saw an opportunity the other way of being able to use my professional skills to do advocacy in an area that I thought was crying out for more advocacy, which is, the role of fathers and their benefits and, the role they play in improving gender equality in Australia. So I was doing a lot, for instance, I do a lot of writing in my professional jobs. It can be briefing papers or, letters to government or op-eds and, or articles. So I saw that as a skill set that I could use in my passion project for, advocating on fatherhood. I think understanding where opportunities to advocate might lie was something that I was able to bring from my professional life into talking about sort of fatherhood and gender equality more, because I could sort of, in an advocacy setting, you're doing it professionally, you're always kind of looking for conducive opportunities to talk about a particular issue or put forward a set of, policy recommendations or recommendations for change. And sometimes those opportunities are more sort of transparent or obvious than other times. So I think as I was doing that work and becoming a new father, and I was looking around thinking, well, a lot of the literature written is for mums, a lot of the discussion about parenting is still targeted at mums. A lot of the, imagery and cultural attitudes are all around mums as the primary carer. So I saw a big opportunity to sort of try and change that narrative. So I was really using a lot of professional skills and bringing them into my passion project. Maybe more recently, as I've, it's interesting because when you're doing advocacy just as an individual, you've probably got a lot more license and flexibility to say what you want and, and do anything at one point in time, because you're not sort of governed by any particular process or structure. So I've probably been able to be a bit more experimental and do different things in my personal sort of passion project advocacy that has given me lessons to take back to my professional job. So in particular, I've tried, to do different events with colleagues. We've hosted online workshops and try to do face-to-face workshops before COVID, and run different events on different topics and try to get a diverse audience in a room to talk about, whether it's fatherhood or gender equality or the role of men. And I was able to take, I think, the lessons learned from those events back into my professional job. So I'm kind of lucky that I guess my personal advocacy and my professional job, there's a really strong link between the two, and they are very transferable. So what might be a good idea professionally, something we've tried in our professional workplace, could easily be something that translates over to my personal advocacy. My personal advocacy tends to be a lot of writing and sort of doing interviews and doing workshops and trying to get stakeholders in a room and have events where we can hash things out. So I'm always on the lookout for sort of lessons I can learn or new innovations that I can take up either way, really.
I mean, that just sounds so wonderful, and I'm super appreciative that you're sharing it for our listeners and our viewers. That there is so much one can do, and I could talk with you, for a long time. But is there anything today that you feel we have not addressed yet that you would love our viewers and listeners to know about?
Look, I guess the other one it's connected. It's not necessarily transferable skills, but in the sense of finding, a balance between working and professional life and caring and, understanding the benefits. I think what's really important for, all parents in my scenario, for dads here, is to find a community and a solidarity with others. And I think that's really hard because a lot of this can sound lovely in an interview and it can sound nice written on paper, but there is a reality when you're, particularly in Australia, when you're trying to be a man looking for part-time work or wanting to take paid parental leave or wanting to be one of the main carers or be a stay-at-home dad, you can bump up against a lot of outdated cultural attitudes. You might not have a lot of dads in your area or in your workplace that are doing the same thing. The policies you might be trying to deal with at the workplace might be out of date and they might not, give you the same level of access to parental leave as a working mum might. So I think it can be really hard and it can lead to a lot of doubt, a lot of stress about, whether you're doing the right thing. So when you're considering, juggling work and family and, you're looking at maybe different ways of handling your career, try and find people that can, you can talk to and open up and share experiences with, whether they're at the workplace or your next door neighbor or online. I think that's really important because I think it can be, and particularly now when there is again so much remote work, we're in and out of lockdowns around the world and the future's so unpredictable, having people you can go on to sort of just connect with and share your experiences and sort of vent to and get your, and talk about the stresses and challenges and joys in your life, I think is really important. And I think that's something that I still kind of struggle with. I think, I talk a lot about parenting to my wife and, some of our neighbors and a lot of working mums, but I think it's still tricky to get men to open up about what it's like to be a working dad trying to juggle with family at this day and age. So finding community and trying not to be alone, I think is really important because it's hard to do the other things well or to get full satisfaction out of them if you're doing it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate your advice. And now, how can people find you on social media, Rob?
So you can find me on LinkedIn if you just put in my name and I guess Rob Sturrock and probably Sydney, Australia into the search, and I should hopefully pop up on LinkedIn and you can see a lot of the things I've written. I have a website, which is just robsturrock.com, which has a lot of my pieces as well. And if you want, I'm on Twitter as well at just at Rob Sturrock. Tends to be a work account, but I'm there as well. And you can also find me. I have an email address connected to my book website, which is the email address is manraisersboy@gmail.com because that was the title of the book. And they're the various ways to find me. And if anyone has questions or would love to share experiences, I always love hearing the experiences of other parents and other workers and, the things they've found that have worked for them or the challenges they've overcome. I think it's really important to swap stories. So if anyone has anything they'd like to share, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you so much. Yes, I fully agree. It's always so nice to, hear stories from all around the world because at the end of the day, being parents, it's like, it doesn't matter the background, the culture. It's sort of somewhat similar experiences that one goes to. And thank you so much again, Rob. It was really wonderful talking to you again.
Thanks, Karin. Lovely to talk again.
Goodbye. I was very happy to share this bonus episode with you today. Rob and I spoke about his transferable skills from unpaid care work as a stay-at-home dad, as well as flexible work, part-time work, and in general fatherhood and advocating for gender equality. I look forward next weekend to start season 3 of my podcast, Job Sharing and Beyond. My first guest will be Ulrike Kremer, who is the Generations Ambassador. Ulrike and I will be talking about intergenerational diversity and its implications for the workforce of today. I really look forward to guests from more than 6 countries, as well as many topics related to future of work, from transferable skills to flexible work, job sharing, as we just said, intergenerational diversity, support for returning professionals, and more. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!